Hello and welcome once again to The Blueprint, Canada's Conservative podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Schmale, Member of Parliament for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock, with new content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. On today's show, we're going to talk about natural health products and the government's ongoing efforts to regulate them even more. Also, mask mandates, maybe, lockdowns. Well, the media is sure talking about that. This and much, much more. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Tell your friends they can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. You name it, it is out there. All right, let's bring on the guest of the show, the man of the hour, Dr. Stephen Ellis, Member of Parliament, Cumberland-Colchester, also the health critic. Thanks for being on.
My pleasure, Jamie. Always great to be here.
We have a new Speaker of the House, just recently announced, Greg Fergus, Member of Parliament for Hull-Elmer. He is going to be taking Anthony Rota's position after he had to step down and resign due to his
technical difficulties.
I think we've all heard the story. We'll see how Greg works out this, I guess, until the next election. Could be 2025, could be sooner, hopefully sooner.
Well, you never know unless he makes a similar mistake to Mr. Rota. So maybe he will suffer the same fate.
Well, let's hope we're all done that horrible, horrible mistake. All right, natural health products. We talked about that a few weeks ago on the show. We wanted to go a bit deeper into it because it continues to percolate below the surface here. So the Liberals are once again, and this seems to come up every time the Liberals are in power. I remember this back in, I believe, 2004, 2005, this same issue arising. And it's to do with natural health products. Why does the government want to take this path? And tell us a bit about it. Maybe you can do better background than I can on this.
You know, the big thing, of course, is that natural health products are medications like probiotics and prebiotics, vitamins, minerals, those types of things. It also encompasses traditional medicines, such as traditional Chinese medicines. So when you look at those as a group, what differentiates them from prescription medications is really related to the fact, of course, that they don't have a patent on those medications. They're not patentable, which, of course, then limits the amount of profit that a company could make. The other thing that really sets them apart is they are incredibly popular with over 70% of Canadians. And that is the big difference. Now, you ask the question, why do they want to regulate them? Well, mostly because they can. But what we've heard back, and I'm sure you experienced the same thing, is more emails, letters, and phone calls related to this particular subject than probably anything else combined since I've been here over the last 2 years. And that also is a pattern that happened when they attempted to regulate them before. We know very clearly that at that point in time, as the story goes, there were wheelbarrows full of mail, and they canceled the plan at that time. You know, one of the things that we've looked at very, very closely is this a sector in need of regulation? Mm-hmm. And very clearly in the House of Commons 2 weeks ago, the new Minister of Health, Mark Holland, suggested that 700 people have been harmed by natural health products. And in his words, some of them have been hospitalized. Now, just for a comparison's sake, in seniors alone, using prescription medications, not just harmed, but hospitalized every year, 50,000 seniors are hospitalized due to prescription medications. Now, that doesn't mean that they're particularly dangerous or they don't work, etc. That's just a comparison to numbers. And I think it's important that people understand the actual scope of any perceived difficulties. We did have Health Canada bureaucrats at Health Committee last week and asked them very specifically for that reference. It's some bizarre Government of Canada website that is almost unfathomably complicated to try and figure out. A government
website? Come on. Come on. Nobody believes you, Dr. Ellis.
But where the number 700 came up with, we asked them to provide that reference at committee, and they have yet to do so. So it becomes very almost nefarious to understand what they're trying to do here. Because we know that the framework that exists in Canada, when we look at other countries, it's the envy of other countries. So they want to emulate what we already have. So in a nutshell, it really is another tax on Canadians. As we might say in our conservative circles, if you tax the farmer that grows the food and the trucker who delivers the food, then guess what? The consumer who buys the food is going to pay more. it's the same thing. If you tax the producer of natural health products,
Yep.
the distributor of natural health products, obviously consumers are going to have to pay more.
Absolutely. And we mentioned this in the last show too, about kind of these nameless faces, unelected bureaucrats, making policy that also has the weight of law to it, right? Where we don't have the opportunity, potentially in this case, of voting on this in the House of Commons, but the bureaucrats can implement this and have that weight behind it. And that is something I think that has gone just a bit too far. It's kind of been growing in steps over the decades, and here we are.
Well, especially when we look at this, and for small and medium-sized businesses, that the cost is really quite exorbitant. Mm-hmm. We reached out to several folks in the industry to say, and again, not just representatives of the industry, but actually people in the industry. And they believe that it's going to cost them as small businesses tens of thousands of dollars. And we all know that we're in an incredible cost of living crisis. It's something that you and I and anybody who is in government these days hears about every single day. Any elected official hears it. So when we're increasing prices for Canadians at a time that is already the highest cost in many people's lives, it becomes even more difficult. So again, that that creation of more taxes by bureaucrats, as you said, is something that is really, it becomes very difficult to fight. But again, we must do that. That's our job, because Canadians have reached out to us and complained that this is an unjust tax on their ability to decide how to treat themselves. And that's an important thing, that freedom of choice to say that, I want to do this. Now, listen, we totally understand that if things are unsafe, they can't be on the Canadian market. The other question that the bureaucrats couldn't answer, though, is will these regulations apply to international products as well? And again, they really don't have an answer for that, or they refuse to answer it.
Well, the answer should be yes if they're going to implement this, because it should be a level playing field. Right. At least it should be.
Well, you know what we did see today, there was some bizarre suggestion by a government website that there's some sort of a pledge, that's what they called it, that international companies could sign on if they so desired. But again, they're forcing Canadian businesses to follow, to pay more, really, in a cost recovery program, to follow their tax advice, to pay more, which will be passed on to consumers. The estimate, this is the strange thing that came up at committee, the estimate to run this new program is about $100 million. They already collect almost $2.5 billion in taxes from natural health products, which, as you know, prescription medications are not taxed.
Yeah.
So consumers are already paying tax on these products, and now they're actually asking producers and distributors to pay more to run another government program. Talk about largesse and waste.
Is there a sector of this economy the government doesn't seem to want more control over? We have two pieces of legislation controlling what we see and hear and access on the internet. We have controls with more taxes and your freedom of movement, that kind of thing. Now they're coming after a sector of the economy that has, I think, provided safe options for Canadians and something they might not want to do through the usual prescription through your doctor process.
Right, and we're not here to say that these are replacement for prescriptions,
No,
but
no.
But what they are is an opportunity for Canadians to have the freedom to choose of what they believe makes them feel healthy and be healthy and act in a healthy manner, which is really what we want. In a time where it's almost impossible to see a healthcare provider, we want Canadians to be very responsible for their own health. And that choice, of course, is being limited because probably a fifth of Canadian small and medium-sized business in this sector, so 20% may go out of business because of these new taxes. And also we know that the cost for consumers is going up, which again is going to reduce choice.
Well, here's two things that cannot exist in the universe: big government and big freedom. They are not compatible at all. So the big people who love big government love big business because you only need about 5 or 6 of them. Look at our telecom industry to deal with, rather than all these pesky mom and pop shops. You using these regulations, as you just pointed out, these new taxes, you can almost eviscerate a lot of the small business, leaving only the big ones that have the capacity to absorb either the increase in costs or the ability to navigate all these new regulations. They are the ones that will be successful.
It's absolutely true. I challenged some of the people in this sector to be able to figure out exactly how much it might cost them to continue to stay in business. And when you look at the government tables, no one is absolutely able to sit down and say, wow, how do you make sense of this? So one of the things that we asked the bureaucrats was to present their budget and give us line by line exactly how are you going to spend $100 million? Because last year, I think in committee, they did inspections on 30 some odd facilities. Is that going to cost $100 million to do 30 inspections? That's some very expensive inspection.
No kidding. All right, let's move on to something that has been kind of going in and out of the media in the last few weeks. I've noticed it a few months ago, one or two articles, I kind of shrugged it off, and then I'm seeing it more and more commonplaces and more on my social media feeds, and that is the potential of mask mandates coming back and health professionals, Health Canada and others, potentially urging Canadians to mask up, whether voluntary or by mandate. And you're a doctor. You went through the pandemic just like the rest of us. What are your thoughts on this? Is it true? Is the media priming the pump to get ready for this, or is it all just media trying to generate clicks and likes and shares?
Well, it becomes very difficult, although I think when you look at some Health Canada officials, Dr. Tam and all her other group of individuals making announcements, oddly enough, they were sitting 6 feet apart and wearing masks. Perhaps they were all unwell because the current advice would suggest that if you're unwell, stay home, wash your hands until you feel better. And I think that's something that, as we might say, that's motherhood and apple pie statements that we know. If you're unwell, stay home. I would suggest to you that for people who are frail or have, significant illnesses, that there may be some place for masking. The studies that were done were not of high quality. It becomes very difficult to understand, who's wearing a mask correctly, which mask were they wearing, all of those things. I would suggest that the literature out there is still very, very unclear on that aspect of it. What is beneficial and what isn't? And certainly, those of us in the Conservative Party need to be clear that people need to make their own choices with common sense to say, if you're sick, stay home, wash your hands, cough into your sleeve, use a tissue. All of those are really good things that I think are important. I think it would be very, very difficult for Canadians to go back to the stage that governments were being very directive in saying, you must do this, you must do that. We know very clearly that there were, from lockdowns to mandates, etc., that many people spoke out very clearly that there were also harms that were done based on those things. And those are things that, again, Canada would be the only G7 country which has not had a pandemic inquiry as of yet to understand if those things that were done were beneficial or not to Canadians and to the country as a whole. So I think that those things are very, very important to understand. And if there's unanswered questions, then we need to press for answers for those things.
I think there was some interest in what is going to happen this fall, this winter, regarding mask mandates and lockdowns. It even made it into the campaign in Manitoba, the provincial elections, where both parties, both the leading parties, came out and said there would be no lockdowns, and they both made that commitment. So obviously, everyone was asking that question in Manitoba, and the political parties in the run for leadership of that province decided, let's make it clear our stance.
I think that's very, very important that governments give clear leadership and direction to its citizens, because all of these things can generate significant concern and worry and anxiety. Whether you're a business who says, I'd like to expand because things are going well, but will I have the financial capability to make bigger facilities or hire more people? I think all that uncertainty creates problems. People worry, should I be thinking about traveling, or do I need to cancel my plans? I'm an elderly person, and am I going to be able to see my family? I have a chronic illness. What's the direction for me? So coming out with that clear direction is beneficial for people to be able to make plans for the future. And that's one of those things that's very essential for many to say, what's my ability to plan for the future? And if governments aren't giving that, then people will fill it with their own narrative, which is not always the right thing.
No, it isn't. I do agree with you that it would be harder, I think, if provincial or federal governments here in Canada decided to implement some kind of a lockdown or restriction on movement. I can't see the majority of the population agreeing to it as they did a few years ago.
I'm with you, Jamie. The people that I speak to are incredibly happy, of course, that the pandemic is over and we're moving forward. And, you know, one of the things that I've said before is that Canadians and Canada as a country needs to learn how to live with COVID-19. You know, we all know that it's not going away, but, you know, if it's a virus out there that we know is going to happen, that's not going to cause you to be hospitalized or get gravely ill, then those are things that we can deal with in an appropriate fashion. So continuing to move forward in that sense, we need it. We know that many businesses, of course, have not recovered from the pandemic, as it were, and that creates significant problems moving forward. And everybody's feeling that cost of inflation as well.
Absolutely. And kids, don't forget children, missing school, the whole bit, learning through an iPad. It was tough on everyone. We're pretty much out of time because we have to get a question period. As you know, final thoughts go to the guest. The floor is yours.
Well, you're very kind. You know, continuing on with the blueprint, one of the things that always worries me is, will this podcast have to now be registered?
Yes.
We see ongoing infringements on our freedoms as Canadians, whether it's looking at the news online and now understanding that podcasts will need to be registered. Canadians really need to realize that their freedoms are at stake, and those things that, because we're nice and Canadian, we often take for granted and believe that they will not be infringed upon. If we're not paying attention, things will happen that you do not want to happen. And as you well know, that's our job as the opposition, to oppose things that the government is trying to impose. And I know that you, as well as myself, will continue to do that on behalf of Canadians. So
it's like a lobster boiling in a pot, right? You just turn it on slowly. You never know what's coming at you, and that's what's happening, piece by piece. Dr. Stephen Ellis, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your time. We appreciate yours as well. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share this program. Great messaging here you're probably not getting in the mainstream media. And, of course, you can download it on platforms like CastBox, iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. New content for you every single Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Until next week, remember, low taxes, less government, more freedom. That's the blueprint.